else joining. We are very lucky to have investigative reporter and Project Veritas founder James O'Keefe here at the Resurgent today, where he's going to talk about a multitude of things. But you all may have seen a lot of his work over the years. I have known James for almost a decade, having done some stuff with him, mostly, activist stuff like what you do, what young conservatives typically do. But I can speak to his work a lot, and I want you guys to know what he's been up to and kind of the progress he's made as a journalist over the last decade or so. And he's done a lot from his college days and certainly a lot as a young professional. He's done a lot to expose Twitter. So we're going to talk about that. He has a new book out, which is a very exciting topic. And James, with my Eastern European background, I love when you insert Pravda as well. So it's very, very interesting title that you have for your new book. We're going to talk about investigative journalism and the state of the media today. So James, thank you so much for joining and taking time out of your schedule to chat with us about all these exciting things.
Thank you, Gabby, for having me.
Of course. So I first want to talk about this new book, American Pravda. It's a sophomore book to your first one, Breakthrough, which you published a few years ago. And I believe on Amazon right now, it's already listed as a bestseller. Am I mistaken with that?
Yes. Thanks with help Rush Limbaugh plugging it today and Friday. It's been awesome.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit of the gist about the book and why you wrote it.
Well, this book, American Pravda, is about, it's sort of like a treatise on modern media. It's a action adventure story of independent citizen journalists who buck the establishment, who circumvent the mainstream press, and what is required to do that, both morally, fighting the system, facing defamation lawsuits, incarceration, detentions at the border, undercover in the Hillary campaign. It really is a David versus Goliath struggle that we face, and we are held to a different standard as citizens, and we have to fight these people, and all the while be held to a higher standard. So I think it's a wake-up call to citizen journalists and to journalism schools. I think one day this book will be read in journalism schools about truth to power and about the economic and political forces against the truth.
No, I mean, you've been trying to buck the trend a lot and expose journalism schools through our friendship and through our many collaborations. And many people are noticing that. And you've been able to assemble an arsenal, especially of young citizen journalists over the years and learning from past experiences. But yeah, you've certainly been shaking up the higher education sphere as well.
Well, we certainly have. We've gone undercover, and Gabby, you name it. We've known each other for what, 12 years now, or something like that.
8 years.
8 years.
Yeah.
I can't even recall. I started the Leadership Institute 11 years ago, 12 years ago, 2006. So, I mean, you name it, we've done it. We've posed as pimps, prostitutes, telephone technicians, terrorists, drug smugglers, rape victims, rapists, child abuse victims, Muslim Brotherhood donors. We've done a lot of things because we believe that the only way it's not just enough to pass along what your sources tell you. We have to challenge the sources. We have to use deception as a means to gain access in order to tell the truth to the masses. But what's remarkable is, I write in this book about George Orwell, who I was born in 1984, the same year that the book was the title of the book. And they don't want you to believe the evidence of your eyes and ears. They want you to believe this propaganda that's not based in fact. So but listen, the real lesson of American Pravda is the kind of moral courage that is required to do this. Because one of the things that happens is when you actually do expose the truth, you face so much flack, and you might even face flack from your own allies, because the greatest temptation is to receive praise and accolades from the mainstream media, that they have a tremendous amount of power. They have more power than all three branches of government. So I think it's a temptation on the conservative side to sell out your brothers in arms to get some positive ink. And that's definitely something that we face. What does our friend Morton Blackwell say? An ounce of loyalty is worth a pound of cleverness, or whatever he says. So, or better, stick by a cause that you think is losing. So I think it's just a lot to unpack here, but I think it's mostly a story of what it takes to buck the trend and to circumvent the media and what goes along with that.
And that's extremely important for anyone wanting to learn how to be a journalist. And you don't have to go that traditional route. You've certainly overcome the traditional route of J school, having to go through certain formal trainings. You've kind of done unconventional stuff to bring down institutions like Acorn. You've helped topple politicians. You've trained activists like Lila Rose, and many people have come under your tutelage and have used the tactics that you've employed in your work to help bring accountability to various different other institutions as well. And people are fearful of that, especially on our side. We've had many conversations about this, and a lot of people are too afraid to suffer the consequences of exposing the truth. And unfortunately, that it discourages people from doing that. But I think you're going to be proven right, especially with your activism, and sometimes even members of the mainstream press, a few occasional ones, there's glimmers of sanity sometimes. They even acknowledge that your work sometimes is accurate and that they were wrong and they've offered corrections, but it's just a matter of putting their feet to the fire in order to do that. And that's why the press is so unfavorable. They're in this echo chamber. You're in the New York City metro area. I'm in the Washington, D.C. area. We see how these people operate day to day. They are so out of touch with mainstream folks. They're mainstream USA. They don't care about what people do with their day-to-day lives. They sip their cocktails and they badmouth everyone that is not like them. And it's so sad that you can't have a pristine journalism.
Well, I mean, one of the problems with the press is that they move in packs, like sort of blackbirds on a telephone wire. They chase these narratives to and fro, and you have to sort of go, okay, we're going to talk about something else. We're going to talk about some independent facts, and it's not really a right-wing argument I'm making here. Noam Chomsky made the same argument in a book called Manufacturing Consent, which is that these media corporations are, they choose to focus on issues that are of not necessarily important or truthful, but serve their bottom line, and they rely on market forces. A lot of them were afraid. There's one chapter of this book, American Pravda, where we went undercover into the Hillary campaign, and we caught Bob Creamer and Scott Fogle on tape inciting violence at Trump rallies, bragging about committing voter fraud. They all resigned, but we couldn't get any media corporation to air the stories. Not even Fox News. Fox News wouldn't do it.
Shame.
And the reason why they wouldn't do it is not because it's not true, but because it is true. There's a great line from the movie The Insider where the CBS 60 Minutes character says, well, you're not going to air the story, not because it's false, because it's so real. And the more real it gets, the more manifestly damning, the more lethal the journalism, the greater the truth, the greater the possibility that it will be censored. And especially with video, images transfix in a way that words don't. One of the craziest things with this Michael Wolff book was this quote from this book where, no one knows what was said because he relied so much on a couple of sources and we don't have any audio, right? And one of the, I think it was Roger Ailes, said something that was unbelievable. And the Washington Post said, there's no evidence that he did not say what was attributed to him. What? There's no evidence he didn't say it? What type of logic is that? We have them on tape actually saying it, and they still say it didn't happen. So there's just this absurd double standard that Andrew Breitbart told me about when I met him, which is that they're going to hold you, James, to a higher standard. They're going to hold you to an impossibly high standard. And that is just, this is not, people say, James, why do you make it so personal? Well, because they're trying to destroy me. They're with us, my team. They're trying to put us in jail. They're trying to kneecap us, and they're trying to prevent donors from giving us money. In Florida and New York and California, I'm under investigation, and they are trying to stop the money from coming into our bank account. It's that, someone wrote war. This is a war, and it's a war by other means. Marcus Luttrell said that the war is not in the deserts overseas, Navy SEALs, not my words, it's his. He says the war is on our own soil. This is how the war manifests. It manifests in the culture, not in the Congress, but in the culture, and the culture is media.
That is very true. And you actually put a stake through one of the biggest extrapolators of media, Twitter, which is a microblogging giant. They've sadly suffered over the years, I think, largely due to censorship and employing certain fishy tactics. But you exposed them recently, and despite the evidence to the contrary of them being honest, a lot of their people that you exposed resigned or stepped down or took pay leave or something, and they're still not admitting fault despite the investigation. So talk a little bit about the investigation and what you hope to do in terms of holding them accountable.
Well, Twitter, I mean, Rush Limbaugh said this the other day, and I agree with him. He said Twitter investigation was probably the most, I think, impactful. I think the most important story we ever did. These companies, these big tech companies, have the power to rewire our democracy. I don't get my information. I get my information from social media. I mean, I don't watch cable news. I have it in my office here. I have the chyrons on. I have it on mute so I can see the agenda, and they're all talking about the same damn thing. They're all talking about the S-hole comment was on the chyron for a week. I mean, give me a break. So we get our information from algorithms.
Yes.
At Twitter, Facebook, and Gmail. I think every single person watching this broadcast uses one of those 4 products: Google, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook. YouTube's owned by Google. So how the companies set their algorithms is something that interested me. So we went undercover for a year, and we met with about a dozen engineers at Twitter. One of them was named Pranay Singh. He's on the direct messaging team at Twitter. And he talks about how they set, if you're tweeting about the American flag, the Christian cross, the Bible, God, then he says you must be a Russian bot if you tweet about those things, because according to Pranay Singh, he says, quote, "Who talks that way anyway?" So the investigation showed that these San Francisco people, none of whom or most of whom are not American citizens, they're on H-1B1 visas, who are engineers, actually they're actually censoring through their shadow banning, they call it.
Yeah.
They're censoring how we communicate with each other, and we don't even know it. And what's more, Gabby, is that the media companies, I'm talking about BuzzFeed, TechCrunch, Wired, are believing the Twitter executives who are on the record denying what we exposed off the record. I mean, it's just, I think the only parallel, Gabby, is the Soviet Union. I don't know of any other way. The Gulag Archipelago, and Alexander Solzhenitsyn wrote about this.
Yep.
We are living in unbelievable times. And I think that it takes desperate times calls for desperate measures. People criticize me for my ethics. Where's the virtue in passing along untrue statements from Twitter brass who say that we don't do this, when the hidden camera shows that they do it?
Yeah, and they've had to suffer for their mistakes. I mean, they've suffered loss of revenue, loss of users, and they're going to continue to suffer unless they kind of self-police themselves. I do this, for my day job, analyzing social media and tactics, and they're going to see a decline if they don't really offer and appeal to multiple viewpoints, not just one viewpoint. And it's a shame, because it used to be a fun platform to go and engage with people, and now it's just giving preference, sadly, to one side over the other if you say a certain thing or don't say a certain thing. And I think you did an excellent job of exposing that. Like, there are people who've been shadow banned, and even some people on the left who've been shadow banned. Very few, but some. But even some on the left may acknowledge that there is more censorship of conservatives that does take place. And I know it was it Sean Hannity or some other people who had their Twitter accounts taken down for a time. And then I think Bill Kristol's was hacked. And then there were some other conservatives who were hacked by Turkish people, and they didn't fix it. And so they are not secure.
No, they're not secure. In fact, one of the engineers says into the hidden camera that they have hundreds of engineers that look at your pictures of your private parts in a sort of voyeuristic way. One of them says, "I can even share that with your ex-wife." Not the type of thing you should be joking about. But I didn't make these claims. The BuzzFeed reported O'Keefe claims, Vanity Fair, O'Keefe implies. I'm not implying anything. I'm quoting. Right. I'm quoting the people at Twitter. And I watch this media, which buys ink by the barrel. Now they buy it by the algorithm. And they're literally and by the way, the scariest thing, Gabby, is I think maybe it was 10, 20 years ago, I don't think we could disagree on the fundamentals. I think the younger generation does not actually believe in the First Amendment. And the scary part is I don't even believe journalists in this country actually believe in the First Amendment. That's the real scary thing. I mean, exposing the stuff is important, but if you don't have the capacity for shame, if you don't share the fundamental values like freedom of conscience, that's the scary part. I don't even think, this book, I talk about being detained at the border. I talk about government agents going through my phone. I talk about being incarcerated. David Daleiden his house was raided by the California Attorney General, Kamala Harris.
Mm-hmm.
AR-15.
Now senator.
Yeah, now she'll probably be the front runner for the presidency. And they raided his home with AR-15s and took his hard drives because he investigated Planned Parenthood, and half of the country goes off with his head, like Marie Antoinette. I mean, I think that's the real story. The story is the process. The story is what is happening to people in this country, which is what this book is all about. It's about the investigation, but it's the reaction to the investigation. And they will say, well, James, you're not a journalist. You're not a journalist. And I say, spare me your righteous indignation crap with your bananas and Apple commercials and your New York Times truth, he said, she said, BS. I've got people who are going to jail, who are being sued in federal court, who are being detained at the border for actually speaking truth to your power. So, I mean, I think the war is in the culture. The war is at the big tech companies. People on the comments are asking right now, are you going to go after the other ones? I mean,
yeah, I was going to actually ask you that. Well, we actually do have some allies in Silicon Valley. There are a few. There's a great group called Lincoln Network, and you guys should talk to them. They are pretty right-leaning, libertarian, conservative-leaning, but it would be nice to see more conservatives in tech. I talk about this now with my work in the private sector here at the Resurgent. I write a lot about why don't we see more diversity viewpoints in tech. Not that we have to have like a affirmative action program, but it would be nice to see people with our ideas there if we can somehow get them in there somehow through honest means. But it would be nice like if more views were represented. And I have friends in the outdoor industry who say that they've been silenced. If you post a hunting or fishing or a shooting sports video on YouTube, you'll get silenced too. So there are a lot of people they're cornering, those who don't fit in line with the Silicon Valley ideals that they're going to be silencing. So it would be, I think more people want to see representation in tech from people who hold middle America viewpoints or flyover country viewpoints. So, yeah.
I think it's a bubble. I mean, one of the things that Mo Narai says in the tape, he's a former Twitter engineer, and he says Silicon Valley is a bubble. People pat each other on the back. It's not so much he says it's not so much a written code. It's more of an unwritten policy that people abide by. But the thing that scares me is investigative journalism is supposed to patrol the boundaries of the moral order, creating righteous indignation by sort of testing and affirming what is not an outrage to people. And I don't even know if you can, I mean, I don't even know if we can outrage people anymore. So I'm very scared. And this book is a wake-up call. I don't live in fear, but I think a lot of Americans do live in fear. And I think they're afraid of doing something about it because they're afraid of being targeted. And I think that all of us have to make a sacrifice in our life to a certain extent. It doesn't have to be what we do at Veritas. I mean, we don't have to, have to go undercover, but the fear that you feel, the fear of being attacked and being targeted by your media, I think you have to be willing to face that a little bit. And I think we have to do it together. Otherwise, we're going to end up like Alexander Solzhenitsyn ended up in your one of your. Are you from where are you from over there? Are you from
Lithuania? You don't remember? From the Baltics? Yeah.
I went to Lithuania for the first time in the summer. I couldn't remember.
Wait, what? You didn't tell me about this?
I didn't tell you. We were very busy, so.
I know. But that's cool. But no, they don't like the Soviets, and Russia today. It's so funny with this whole Russia thing. Like, I laugh at it because these people actually downplay the real threats Russia poses, not this whole convoluted Russia collusion thing. They have this whole idea of collusion warped. Where were they when they were colluding, when Ted Kennedy asked for them to, invade or to interfere with the election with Reagan? And then where were they with all these other things when Putin rose to power, when, the reset button? So it's all baloney in terms of their authentic concern for Eastern Europeans' well-being or for Russia collusion. They're very selective when it comes to Russia. Well,
the CNN tapes that we did in June, the guy goes, the Russia stuff is all BS for ratings. The Washington Post reporter said, remember this tape in December? He goes, this is the national security reporter, Dan Lamothe. He's the Russian beat for the Washington Post. And he goes, I don't even know where they're getting their opinions from. I don't even know where he says, I can't believe I work at a place where people talk about, all this crap that isn't grounded in truth. So, and everyone said, pay no attention to that O'Keefe video. Dan Lamothe apologized for his honesty. He's apologizing for being honest.
That's crazy.
That's
so funny.
The only solution is for people to go expose the truth and face the fire. And let me tell you something. When I tell you face the fire, I want to make very clear that right now they're trying to shut us down. They are trying to shut us down and cut off our money supply by targeting our donors, targeting the banks that actually transmit the money to us. This is an existential fight. So if people want to live like an ostrich in the sand and be ignorant, you know, don't live not by lies. Understand the truth and support the people who are fighting for it.
That's a good takeaway, and we'll include a link for people to support Project Veritas if they have a need. But I wanted to ask you kind of a final thought related to, there are probably some budding journalists watching, and you've made the rounds to different conferences. I know I've seen on social media you said you had many people interested in learning more about Project Veritas, but what do you say to someone who wants to become a journalist, doesn't want to go the traditional route? How do they become a journalist? How do they seek out truth, especially in this day and age?
My advice for independent people who want to become journalists is to do journalism, is to not go to journalism school, is to not take a class, is to not start a website. My advice to people who want to do journalism is take out your iPhone and go do it, and make the product. Content is king, right? You've been hearing me say that for 10 years.
Yeah.
I got started with I mean, the Acorn investigation cost me $1,000, and it took down Acorn. Both houses of Congress were democratically controlled, and President Obama signed the legislation. A 25-year-old kid with an I mean, the biggest story there is, why does it take a 25-year-old kid and a 20-year-old intern who met on Facebook with a video camera and their grandmother's chinchilla coat? I mean, it costs us $1,000. It costs CNN more to turn on their hologram machine, right?
Right.
And why does it take that? Well, because you just got to walk and start asking people questions with a camera. You don't have to do it undercover. I mean, I guess you could do it with your phone at your side, but anybody can do it. Anybody can do it. And that my advice is to not join a newspaper or join a media company, but to just start creating videos and putting them out there. And you could even join Project Veritas. We have 1,000 applications to become undercover reporters. That's another pathway for you.
Yeah, there are many ways, and social media is giving preference to video in spite of all their algorithm tactics that may downgrade conservative or alternative kind of viewpoints. But you can still make videos, and I think people will find ways to broadcast them, whether it's
if the videos are good enough, they won't be able to censor them.
Hopefully not, yeah.
If the videos are good enough, like even in the beginning when they took down the Planned Parenthood videos, you know, all your friends can repost the videos. If the content is strong enough, if there's videotape of a federal judge accepting a bribe, for example, that video is going to get out there. So content is king, and content galvanizes the masses and catalyzes the masses and can really outrage 80% of people. Question is, can you get the story? And you're not going to get the story by going to journalism school, because they're going to teach you how to kind of follow the established and ordained narrative.
That is true. You have to be unconventional today to stand out, and you certainly have. So, James, where can everyone connect with you and Project Veritas?
ProjectVeritas.com is the website. The spelling is behind my head. And if you go to Amazon or Barnes & Noble right now, the book American Pravda is out, and it's a great read. And I promise you won't regret buying it.
That is a good piece of advice, and hopefully I'll get a chance to read it too, since my family knew what Pravda was all about. So I think there are probably some good similarities with that. So James, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to chat with us. Hopefully everyone watching found this to be very informative. And if you guys want to support James's work or connect with him, feel free to do so. And I have no doubt he will happily oblige. So James, thank you so much. And hopefully I'll see you soon, sometime in the near future.
See you soon.
Yes.
Thanks, Gabby.
All right. All right, everyone. Thank you for watching. And we'll have some more interesting interviews in the future.